And we're live. It's the Dave K Show, episode number 13. Welcome everybody to our great show we have today. We have two amazing guests that are I don't even know what's gonna happen today, to be honest with you. We're just gonna see what happens.
That makes three of us.
And before I introduce them, I want to go ahead and give a plug out to PointCompReporter.com. And we are cross-promoting each other every episode. PointCompReporter.com is a Point Copi's oldest locally owned, continuously operated news website. Since 2012, they have been Point Copi's news and information hub. Check them out at PointCompReporter.com, and you can check the Dave K Show out on the front page. On the right-hand side, we'll be live, and all of our episodes should be on there, so make sure you check them out. Okay, so we got a lot to talk about today. I have two great guests, and I know both of these people. They're incredible people. First of all is Mr. Chuck Bush, who really needs no introduction, but in case your head was in the sand for the past 50 years, he is a local filmmaker. He's a teacher. He's an author. He's a publisher. He's just anything having to do with the film industry. Chuck Bush is the quintessential walking encyclopedia.
Wow, thanks, Dave.
Yes, that's an understatement. So also sitting next to him is Miss Lisa Calhoun.
Lisa Poche Calhoun.
Poche Calhoun.
Yeah,
I had him wrong on here.
now,
Yes.
in
That's
the film industry, which is how we first knew each other, I just went as Lisa Calhoun. And now that I'm an author, I go with Lisa Poche Calhoun. So no
Right.
problem, Dave.
Right. Not a problem at all. So, and,
Yep.
and you're an author, and you do a lot of other things also. So
Yeah. Yeah.
What are some other accomplishments or things you've done in the film industry?
Oh, in the film
or-
industry, I did. I worked in front of the camera, and then I found it more interesting behind the camera. I didn't. This guy here is going to make me laugh probably a dozen times a minute. So anyway,
Do your thing. Do
Personal
your
speed
thing.
record
Yeah.
for me.
so I worked in front of the camera, then I went behind the camera. I scouted locations and did a few other things, but I really liked scouting locations. Finished that career with scouting locations for the last two Twilight movies.
Okay.
Yeah, and
How'd you get that gig?
they just called in and offered other movies. I had done a lot of scouting by that time.
Right.
And they just called, interviewed, wouldn't tell me what the name of the gig was. And it was kind of interesting. And I said, well, as a scout, you always want to scout another movie. But if you're not going to tell me anything about the movie, it's kind of like a giant red flag. So I
Could
said,
be.
so what's this rated? And the guy tells me, he says, probably PG-14. I said, well, okay.
Right.
So I ended up, we negotiated a very good day rate, so I knew it was large budget, and I agreed to take the gig. And he says, okay. He says, I'm going to email you a non-disclosure, print it, sign it, scan it, email it back to me, and I'll call you and tell you what you're working on. So now I need to tell you, I've raised only sons. I've never raised a daughter, so I wasn't familiar with this. So he calls back and he says, you're working on Twilight. And I had no idea what Twilight was. And he heard it in my voice. I said, oh, that's great. And he says, you don't even know what it is. And I said, I'm not going to lie to you, no. And he says, I didn't know either. And this is one of the biggest location managers in Hollywood. His resume is just mind-boggling. And so I started. That's how I got that job.
Right. Why do you think he didn't really know what it was like you did?
He was in his 50s, just a single man, no
Right.
kids, and just.
So old.
Yeah.
Right.
So decrepit.
I'm with you. I am with you.
So, but yeah, so he didn't have any daughters that were hung up on Twilight. But
Right.
It ended up being an important thing in my life. I appreciate Twilight.
Sure. And it's interesting to hear how everybody got started in the film industry. It's everybody has their own path to get to where they are right now. And it's just really interesting to hear, because everybody has a different life they live and different experiences and different set of circumstances that led them to where they are. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
So Chuck, like I said, you need no introduction, but I want to find out. Let's go back
Sure.
way back in time. As far as we need to go back, as far as when did you first get involved or interested in filmmaking?
Wow.
This is a good
Involved and
story.
interested.
Yeah.
That's two different things, because I had a love for film since I was probably 10 years old, easily. One of the most influential films in my life I saw when I was, I think, 11, which was, interesting enough, Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's how old I am.
Yeah.
But and then I got into the film business in 1983. I was living in Austin, Texas, working as a bodyguard, because even though this chair is very low, I'm a big guy. And
That's why he's in a low chair.
He's
That's
5'20".
I'm 5'20", and so
That's
and
your own
so
words, Chuck.
2 meters, yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, stealing my thunder. Yeah, you'll laugh at that when you
Yeah.
see me talk for a while. So I walked into a 7-Eleven coming home from a job, and the director was walking out, Kevin Reynolds, and his assistant, a gentleman named Mark Ilsley, walked back in at Kevin's behest and said, "How would you like to be in a movie?"
Just like that.
Just like that. And I said, "Can you give me a minute?" Because I was trying to buy some stuff, and my dog was in the car with the window down, and I didn't want her jumping out the window and hanging herself because the leash was around the steering wheel. And that was April the 3rd, 1983.
Wow, you got the date and the month and everything down.
Oh, man, yeah.
Wow,
So
the rest is history.
and yeah, if you've seen the movie, and that film was Fandango, starring this guy who I've outshined for years, and he's just now kind of catching up. A guy named Kevin Costner.
KC, yep.
Yeah, and Judd Nelson, and Susie Amos, who hey Suze, love you, kid. Susie was she played the granddaughter in Titanic.
Oh wow, I didn't know
If
that.
you remember that, when she was the one that had the necklace that gave it back to the grandmother who dropped
that was
it.
her.
And that's where she met her now husband, Mr. James Cameron. So Susie is
Wow.
now Mrs. James Cameron.
Incredible. So I would love to see the address book on your phone.
Oh yeah, password protected. Yeah, absolutely. Well, honestly, Dave, like I am with you, I'm very blessed to have a lot of good friends who trust me with these things and who I get to be involved in their life.
Absolutely
So-
right.
Not her.
Right.
Not her.
Exactly.
She's making me walk home from New Roads. I'm just saying.
If
Just
if
saying.
you behave, you can have a ride home.
Right.
See what I mean? That's typically, it's just saying, you might as well just say, Chuck, you're walking home. Might as well, same result.
As long as we end this on a positive note, I think you're good to go.
Okay, good enough.
You are. I think
A
so.
sharp. Anyway,
That's
positive
right. I
note.
always have a plan B and a C and a D, like we always say. So obviously you had no acting experience. You said you want to be in a movie, and you go like, well, let me think about it. Sure. So
Mm-hmm.
what happened after that?
Well, it was interesting because, it was a studio film. It was a Warner Brothers film. And I knew Warner Brothers was in town because literally right down the street from where I lived, they had the big Warner Brothers 18-wheelers parked in the parking lot.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, so this must be legit. So I go down the next morning and read for the role, and they gave me the spot. They gave me the role on the spot and moved me into the hotel. And
incredible.
so
Tell
for
about telling your parents.
yeah, pretty funny story. So it's April 3rd, which was a Sunday night after April Fool's Day, and I called my folks when I get home and said, Mom, Dad, it's 11:30 at night. I've just been asked to be in a movie, and they're like, okay, whatever, yeah, fine, call us tomorrow.
Right.
So I did that the next day after I auditioned, and they gave me the role, and so I called my dad, and he got my mom on the line, and I said, listen, they want me to be in this movie, and my mom says, ask them how much they're going to charge you, how much it's going to cost you, and I said, okay, hold on a second. My mom wants to know how much it's going to cost me. They said, actually, we're going to pay you about $1,500 a week. I said, they're going to pay me. She said, sign the contract.
Yes.
And the rest is history. Of course,
Yes.
back 36 years ago, man, $1,500 a week was.
Oh yeah.
was
That
good
was
money.
a lot. That was a lot. So what role did you have in the film?
I play Dorman, who's one of it's a road movie about 5 friends who repeat a tradition that they had done 4 years earlier. It's a period piece, takes place in the Vietnam era. And it's been out there forever, so I don't think I'm spoiling things for you guys. But basically, Kevin Costner's character is going to skip out on the draft. And so it's kind of the road trip is kind of a cover for him leaving the country. And we go through some crazy stuff. And it was written by Kevin Reynolds, as I said before, who also directed, who is a protege of Steven Spielberg. In fact, Fandango was the first production by Steven Spielberg's new company, Amblin Entertainment. We were his first
That is
his
interesting.
first production.
So of course back then, there were a lot of firsts happening back then because the film industry was still kind of up and coming, and new actors on the scene, new movie stars are coming up on the
Sure.
scene. Like
Sure.
Easy Rider filmed here in Morganza. Almost 50 years ago. We have our 50th anniversary coming up later on this year with Jack Nicholson, Dennis Hopper, and all those people.
Sure.
And it's like even back then, they were up and coming, not even well-known actors back then.
Right.
Kind of the same thing that you were in whenever you were approached for this film. These Steven Spielberg and all these guys were just kind of up and coming people. I know They had to develop new technology for a lot of films that they
Right.
didn't even have, you know, because
Sure.
it's just up and coming. You just winging it as we go, you know. So after you did this film, what was the general consensus of how good of a film was it? Did it get good reviews?
You know, it's interesting because the first thing that happened was Steven Spielberg screened it, and he had notes, and so we actually in '84 went back and reshot some of it that you currently see now. The scene where we're driving in the car and I lock everybody out, and Judd Nelson's driving, and that was all reshot because Steven Spielberg said, you know, try this kind of fell flat. Try doing this. And of course we did it, and it absolutely worked. And I remember very clearly Kevin Costner getting notes from Steven Spielberg that you're going to be a big star.
Wow.
Even back then.
Right.
And you know, and what a blessing to be a part of, because Kevin Reynolds, most people don't know this. Kevin Reynolds wrote the original Red Dawn, and he wrote it while Kevin Reynolds was a lawyer who went back to film school because he had a passion to want to be a filmmaker. And so Steven Spielberg literally pulled him out of class at USC to tell him the sale had been done on Red Dawn.
That is amazing.
Yeah,
That's
so
a classic film too. Love that. Love Red Dawn. Yes. So after all the fanfare with Fandango, kind of played itself out, and so what was your next step after that?
Well, at Kevin Costner's, what would I call it? Not his request, but his input was that I should wait for Fandango to come out before I tried to do anything further, because you know, once you're an actor in a Warner Brothers film, it opens a lot of doors for people that, you know, it normally doesn't open. So I sat out until it came out in 1985. Didn't really do very, very well at the box office. It was a very small picture with a bunch of unknown people. But
how old were you at the time?
21, almost 22.
Oh wow.
What's he
okay.
pulling up? Please don't pull up Fandango over here. Oh, and he is. Look at him go. Oh goodness. I never liked that kid. Never knew once.
Yeah, 1985. There it
Yeah,
is.
it is.
IMDb.
Yeah. And there I am on the poster. Guess which one I am?
Oh no, let's see. The tallest back then.
The
too?
real big one. Yeah. Boom. There's me, right in the middle, the big sore thumb. There you go. Thank you.
Was this done behind a green screen, or how was this done?
Oh, that was painted. That's paint. That's
Painted?
a painting. That's a
Really?
painting.
Okay.
Yeah. That's our car, and there's a bunch of stills. I might be in a couple of those stills. You never can tell. So, that was a foreign cover. These are foreign covers. Look, it's great stuff, man.
Wow.
Right? Very cool. Very
Yes,
cool.
indeed.
Anyway, so yeah. So what a great time though. What a great time.
Yeah, I mean, I bet that was a lot of fun for you to kind of go back and look at, you know, back in your younger days, how all this happened, and relive all the memories and everything.
I had hair, David.
I was
What do you
gonna
think?
I was
say
about to
that,
go
but-
there.
Stole my thunder. Isn't that your line?
and it's not the
Had a
last
lot
time
of
today.
hair.
Right, I was about to go there. You still have a little bit of hair right here.
That's it.
Never gonna
Yeah.
go.
That's it. Well, you
Never.
know, it takes a big man to grow hair. It takes a better man to keep it rubbed off.
Rubbed off.
Oh yeah. So
Stop it.
what was the point in time where, you know, Fandango came out? You waited a little while for it to come out, and you were seen. You know, and so when you started getting traction into the film industry, how did that happen?
Well, you know, I had never intended to be in the film industry, per se. You know, being my size, you're kind of always the known guy. And when I was at Texas State Tech, I was voted most popular man on campus just because everybody knew who I was. So I thought, you know, at some point in time, you know, maybe I'm 25 years old, nothing ever really happened, and maybe I'll go to LA and see what happens. But that's about as much as I'd ever thought. But once I did Fandango, then a friend of mine, Martin Fultz from Homa, was making an independent film. He said, well, you know, Chuck's been in a movie, let's get him out here and have him act all crazy in the swamp, and that'll do it. And that was
easy.
that was Nutria Man,
Huh.
Terror in the Swamp. Hunting season is open on you. So that was that, and so it was all great. You know, I'd done a bunch of smaller roles, but because I had never intended to be an actor, there was a lot of consequences that I wasn't prepared for. For example, for those of you who've been out to LA before, you know, when a studio film comes out, lots of big advertising, and there was a 40-foot poster of the film that you saw right there on the side of the wall at Warner Brothers.
Wow.
And so I had no anonymity whatsoever. And especially hometown, when I went between the time the film came out and I was on to the next film, I go see my parents, and my dad said to me literally one day, he said, son, when you're in town, come see us, come to the house and have dinner. but we can't go out and eat anymore because I was constantly being asked for autographs and
That's
things.
amazing. Yeah.
And
Wow, even
you
at
know,
your
and it's
level,
not bad. I mean, people were not. Nobody was ever been rude, but when you're trying to have dinner with your parents that you only get to see, a couple times a year,
Right.
it's it just gets a lot of hand.
And it gives you an appreciation for the big stars out there and
Oh,
what
it
they
does.
go through.
Absolutely does. And so, but I've always been kind of a storyteller by nature. So in 1993, I wrote my first screenplay, which was optioned by Premier Pictures, Frank Schroeder, who also helped me write it and taught me so much about screenwriting. Frank, if you get to watch this, pal, thanks. And so that's just it from there. And since then, I've written 6 screenplays, 4 of which I've sold,
Incredible.
and 2 of which I've actually been optioned. And then I've written 3 other ones that were just written for me.
Now, for the people out there that don't know, what does optioned mean?
Option means that somebody wanted it and was not sure if they had an immediate need for it, so they wanted the option to purchase it, take it out and shop it a little bit, and so you get money and they get the right to sell it first.
So it kind of sits on a shelf temporarily? Is
Yes.
that kind of what it does?
Okay, usually for about a year.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously somewhere down the line, you enjoyed the whole filmmaking process, not just being an actor, but the whole filmmaking process. So you kind of
Absolutely.
migrated behind the camera.
Absolutely, because it's so much more anonymous and so much more comfortable. I mean, it's a big ego boost, and let me tell you something. I'm a big guy. I don't know anybody that had a bigger ego than me at that time,
right.
and that was not healthy for me. It certainly was not conducive to a country boy who's got a Christian upbringing.
Right.
But over time we grow, we learn.
Right.
And so from that point on, it was pretty much producing and writing. I've also been a post-production supervisor, and in the last couple of years I've started directing. So,
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
So at what point did you move back to Baton Rouge area?
Well, wow, that's a long deal because I'm not from Baton Rouge. I'm from
okay.
I was born in New Orleans, raised in Houma, came to Baton Rouge to go to LSU, left to go to Austin. Actually went to Waco first, then Austin. Got discovered in Austin, and then moved to LA for a while. Then back to Houma, then Baton Rouge because it's culture shock, man, going from LA to
Wow,
Houma.
right.
I mean, that was culture. I mean,
Yeah.
your blood pressure goes up and you're yelling at people. You find somewhere to go. Get off the
Right.
way. I'm trying to get through here. Not very nice. So Baton Rouge is about as close as I could come.
Right.
And then wound up living in Denver for a while.
Denver. Okay.
Denver, and then came
What
back
brought
here.
you to Denver?
A plane, Dave. No, I left film for a while. Started doing music again, and I worked for a company called Pro Sound because music was my first passion. I've been a songwriter since I was 18, and a published writer since I was 21.
Okay, did not know that
And
either. Wow.
yeah, and I actually am an ASCAP writer, and so I just went to Denver to kind of get away. In the in-between time, I lost my first of 2 sisters in 1986, and so it was good to be able. Once I was with my folks for a long enough time that things kind of settled down on the home front, then I left to go kind of just get away and get get things clear, and then came back here when my father had a heart attack in 1990-ish, end of '89, and to be close to family and stuff, and kind of been here ever since.
Right.
Been back here ever since.
So you consider this pretty much your home base from here on out?
Absolutely.
That's great.
Love this place. I have kids here. They go to school at Dutchtown, small community stuff, and so love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
and
very blessed.
And I see Lisa sitting over here, kind of just taking everything in. We're going to get to you in just a second, I promise.
I'm good. I'm
We're going to
good.
let you.
She's
loose in a
good.
second.
She's
Yeah.
good
Yeah, she's behaving herself now.
for a change.
Wait. Make me sound like the bad guy. Are you paying Dave, Chuck?
Yes,
It's a big
absolutely.
table, I don't know.
That's it.
So that's great. I took one of your classes a long time at BRCC.
Yes, sir.
It seems like a long time ago, a lifetime ago. And so, obviously, you have the heart of an instructor. You love teaching people. You love showing people how
Well,
things are done. And you
thank
break
you.
things down so simply that people can understand.
Thank you.
And that's what I really appreciate about you. And you're so willing to give of your knowledge that you have. Real
Well, I've been
serious.
given
Yes.
so much, Dave. I've been given so much.
Yeah.
What a sin not to give back.
Yes, it is.
Right. So yeah, thank you.
What good does
Thank
that do
for-
if you hold it in, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And all the people you've inspired, the countless people you've inspired to go and do their thing, tell their stories. Serious, really.
Well, man, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Right,
much.
and that's what I appreciate about you too. You know, so I took some of your classes back at BRCC. That was really good. Always learning. I always tell people you can't get around Chuck Bush and not learn something. Even if you're with him for 5 minutes, you're gonna learn something.
You're gonna learn how he smells.
You're going to learn that he's a smart aleck. Oh,
Well, I'd argue, but it's true.
I know.
Can't argue with the truth.
Right. And so you enjoy, of course, like I said, the instructing atmosphere to be in. You enjoy behind the camera. You enjoy the whole filmmaking process as a whole, and how to put everything together. So tell us, kind of, what I want to go back is like you were. What was the height of your career? I guess you could say. I mean, all these things that happened to you through the years. Where was the peak of your career at? If it even happened yet, I don't even know. But I mean,
Wow. Well, you know, I hope my career's not peaked yet because, you know, in as you pointed out in 2010, I had a massive stroke.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that too. Yeah.
Well, the stroke was interesting because, you know, I wouldn't say it was a stroke of luck or a stroke of genius,
Right.
but it had its own providence, you know, because I'm a Christian and I believe that God has purpose in our pain.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so it gives me authenticity to be able to talk to people about, you know, living a life dealing with pain and value, what your value is, you know, without me having to fake it or use platitudes. I can speak from my own experience. But when I had the stroke, it sort of took me out of filmmaking and things for just a little while. So it took me I guess the better part of 6 months to learn how to walk again. I was completely paralyzed on my left side, completely flaccid.
Wow.
And
how was your speech?
Well, for most people, unfortunately, my speech was fine, and I've always had a
That's
little
a
bit
gift.
I've always had,
Right.
you know, that keeps on giving.
You're going to have to remind me I said that.
Oh, I will, over and
And
over
over and over.
and over. But yeah, so you know, so it was a bit of a hiatus for me. The physical limitations. You know, I had to come to terms with the fact that I can't really, you know, pick up camera gear and set shots myself, that I have to depend on other people.
Right.
But it's also allowed me to focus on the things that my mind still would allow me to do. Not long after the stroke, I started teaching private classes in film. You know, I teach screenwriting, I teach camera, I teach editing, I teach directing. As you know, you've been
Right.
gracious enough to have me brought up here a couple of times.
And
to
you'll be
teach some
back
classes.
again, I
Oh,
promise.
Thank you, man. And that's on record. That's on record.
Right, you will.
But yeah, so that's, I mean, that's, and I'm passionate about telling stories. Yes, I love to teach and talk to people. I love to impact people in some way. And you know, it's one thing I had to learn was if you want to impress people, you tell them what you've done. But if how you've succeeded. If you want to impact people, then tell them how you failed.
Wow.
And so, you know, my thing is I want to impact people, you know, because when you impress people, you get a little bit of notoriety, but it's fleeting. But if you impact people, then as you were so kind to mention, you build a legacy of people that you've helped build and grow and so into the industry that has given you so much.
Right.
So
That's true. Yes, absolutely. So you want to expound upon that, Lisa? I mean, in your world, I mean, as what Chuck is saying, you know, in your world, also filmmaking and, you know, authorship and everything. So kind of expound upon that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, Chuck and I, we joke, we call ourselves the Cane Brigade
the
because
Cane Gang.
yeah,
Back on the Cane
yeah,
Gang.
because I took a nasty fall years ago and while working in the film industry, and then you know, between gigs, I would write for newspapers and magazines, and then suddenly I find myself on the recliner using crutches at the time, and when it dawned on me that it was going to be kind of a long haul, and that was 2011, and I'm still on a cane in 2019. So
Right.
I said, well, you know, I got time to write that novel I always wanted to write.
There you go.
And
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 that's right.
go ahead, Chuck.
No, I'm just saying it's not the great American novel; it's the great big American novel.
Right.
Look,
Yeah,
don't make me call
Hold
your
that book up. Hold that book up for the camera because we're going to
Yes.
discuss this in a minute. That's
Hope
a
you got a
Yes.
wide
do
angle lens
it
on that
sideways so we can see all the
See,
pages.
It's
Yeah.
a large book.
That's a
Chuck
big-
teases me, and
As compared to Chuck's book here.
Chuck's pamphlet.
Right.
yeah. Okay, so I didn't
Chuck's
say
pamphlet.
I do
Her
tease
book.
him as a pamphlet when he teases me about killing trees.
Right.
But it's available on Kindle, so you don't have to kill any trees.
Yes, that's a great segue into our next segment here is like, how did y'all two get together? So what do y'all two have in common? Why are y'all sitting at this table together?
We had met I'm a glutton for punishment.
She is, y'all. She is.
We had met years ago on a film set, and
But better, we were actually on a film
the-
set the same time and didn't even know it
yes,
because she worked on Because of Winn-Dixie, and I visited the set of the movie that she was locationed
Oh, Winn-Dixie,
on.
yeah, the horse.
no, I
No,
wasn't.
no.
I wasn't locations.
The dog.
It's the dog.
The
yeah.
dog, right, the
Yeah,
dog.
it was
Yeah.
a
Done
dog.
with,
Right, the dog.
with Jeff Daniels.
Yes.
Yeah. What we-
It's Spud McConnell.
and Spud. Love
Yeah.
you, Spud.
And stay out of the
boy.
Woolworth.
That's exactly
Yeah.
exactly. That's his line.
That's his line. Yeah, with a list.
So what did you work on that film? You didn't do
I
locations?
actually did background work on that.
She was a BG.
back.
Okay.
In,
She was
back
one of the
in
Bee
day.
Gees.
Wow.
Staying alive. Yeah, it's tragic.
Yeah.
And,
But,
so that's so we were actually on that set at the same
Yeah.
time because at the time I was working on the film incentives with Representative Gary Beard, and so
Mm-hmm.
we went down there to visit the set to see Wang, the director. And,
Wang Wang.
Yes, but that's the way he said it. Ah, Wang. Oh, it's so nice to meet you. So sorry, Wayne.
I hope Wayne
Don't hate me.
sees you.
Yeah, don't hate me. Don't hate me because I'm beautiful. And so
Or
anyways,
smart.
so that's the. And he's silenced. So that's the first set we didn't even know
Yeah,
until
yeah.
the other day we found that out.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But the actual story of us meeting was
On, I think it was a movie called Dark Circles.
could have been
I'm trying to think because I had two. That was Deidre was UPM.
Deidre
yes.
Lacasse.
Yeah, I think
Hi,
that was.
Dee.
I did two.
Love you, girl.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
did.
if you're
we
watching,
both
hope she's
love her.
watching.
Yeah,
Somebody
Um,
send her the link if she's not.
I will. I will.
Yeah.
So I think it was Dark Circles, and I was working locations at the same place where Chuck was living in the penthouse
Ah.
back in the day.
Penthouse,
Right.
outhouse, throw houses.
No, that's, people that live in the penthouse say that, Chuck.
So something happened with that got y'all two connected together to where y'all are today. So
Well, we both, he had his stroke. I had my accident not much longer after his stroke. And we both ended up authors. And then he figured that out some kind of way. Which,
Yeah, we were friends on Facebook,
yeah,
and I saw how hard she worked at promoting her work.
yeah,
I mean, this girl hustles, man. I mean,
Yep.
no
Awesome.
kidding.
yeah.
She's a real deal when it
does.
comes to
Marketing,
That's great.
you
And
know,
that's- and
writing's the easy part.
And that's one reason we do the BCK Publishing podcast to help people get self-published
Yes.
because we can
Yeah.
really
Right.
lean on her experience. I make jokes, she makes sense,
right,
and so that's how that happens.
right.
But
No.
and so I just reached out one day and said, look, I have another friend who's a novelist who's Cindy Ray. She writes under the name CC Ray, and I said we should just get together and see how we can help each other out. Louisiana artists, writers,
Yep.
authors, trying to do something
great.
together. And so she generously agreed to
Yep.
share her experience with us and been doing it ever since.
Yeah, and it's been great because it's three people who really have been, we've taught ourselves self-publishing the
Yes.
hard way. We know what you don't want to do too, besides
Yes.
what you
Right.
need to do.
We know
Right.
exactly what
Yeah.
not to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, saving time and money. So
Exactly.
So BCK Publishing. Talk a little bit about what that is and how it helps people. What does that do?
Sure. Well, BCK Publishing is my company that is a book publisher, but we together do the BCK Publishing self-publishing podcast where the three published authors pick a topic and we talk about everything from marketing your book, building an audience, character development, to things like what you don't expect to do as an author, unauthor jobs. We had Patsy Poche,
Yep.
the grammar goddess, as
Yeah.
she prefers to be
Yep.
called.
She's an editor.
She's a
or-
yes.
And she, because Chuck and Cindy were treating me like I was the grammar queen. And I was like, no.
Our survey said.
No, I'm going to show
Right.
you. I'm going to introduce you to the real grammar queen.
Yeah.
The one that I, messaged like, Patsy, is it going to be this or that? Oh, it's going to be that. I'm like, thanks,
Right.
because, the grammar, the English language is an interesting thing.
Right.
And,
Hats
I
off
use
to
it
the
sometimes. I use it sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm a believer.
yeah, and sometimes he doesn't by
Yes.
accident.
Right.
Yes.
Editors are kind of the unseen people behind the scenes
Oh,
working.
yeah.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a whole podcast on why you need an editor.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. So how can we look at the podcast? How can we find it?
Well, the podcast is actually on Patreon.
Patreon.
If
Okay.
you're familiar with Patreon,
Yes.
Patreon, patreon.com, BCK Publishing.
Okay.
Patreon.com
Yep.
/BCK Publishing. And we have 9 episodes, about to have 10 episodes up. We have 15 already done in the can, and we just drop one every other week.
That's great. That's awesome.
That helps because if you can write somewhat, if you like you
Yeah.
were saying earlier in the previous podcast, you got to have a voice, right?
Right.
And so if you want to tell your story and nobody will listen, we show you how, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people in Louisiana. I mean, we're known for stories that want to tell their story and believe they have to go through a publisher. But we've met so many wonderful people that are self-publishing,
Right.
that are doing it themselves and getting it out there and kind of getting rid of the middleman.
Yep.
And technology today will allow you to do that.
Yep, yep.
You know,
Right.
We
ahead.
have one of our podcasts where we talk about why you should self-publish and not really look for the big publishing house. There's a lot of advantages to
Right.
self-publishing.
Go over a few of
and-
those. 'Cause I think I know one of them.
Well, you own all your rights, you
Yes.
know, and a
And you
lot of
control your story.
you control
That's
your
the thing I was
story.
thinking about. Yes.
You can control the name of your book. With self-publishing, we can just go through and what's some of like Chuck playing with his phone.
I was going to
Oh,
pull out, I was going to pull out the new cover of my new book
Okay.
coming out in July. In
Yeah,
June.
go for
I
it.
Thank
tease
you.
him about playing with his phone like a teenager, guys.
With my one good hand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's fast with his. Anyway,
Oh, stop it.
so no, but with the self-publishing, there's so many different things, and if you're needing a change on your cover or you're needing a change anything with formatting, anything that you would have the publisher do, it's so easy these days. Just
Yeah,
go in
it's
and do it
awesome.
yourself,
Yeah.
guys.
And fairly instantaneous.
Yes, and
Like-
you're not waiting for a month hoping that they're gonna, that you're gonna be next, and
Right.
you're in control
Right.
that way.
Right.
And it's nice to know how everything works too, instead of just having somebody else do it.
So instead of getting maybe
Hmm.
10, 12% of your revenue in a royalty, you get 30, 40, 50, depending on
Yeah,
the way you go about it.
Right. That's awesome.
yeah, because
Yeah. And it can be done. It can be done, and we
Yep.
can show you how.
yep.
That's great. Yeah. Definitely.
You know, we also have a book that we've offered.
Yes.
It's a free book. It's a ebook.
Mm-hmm.
It's called How to Become a Published Author.
Mm-hmm.
And Chuck and I and Cindy Ray walk you through everything.
That's great. How can they get the free guide?
All they do is send me an email.
Send you an email.
Publisher@bckpublishing.com, and we'll send it to them. All they got to do is say, hey, this
Yep.
is where to send it. No charge,
Yep.
no cost.
That's
Yep.
awesome. Very, very
You
good.
know, we will not
Email.
use their email to sell them something else. Just
Right.
send us an email and say, hey, send it here.
That's great.
Publisher@bckpublishing.com.
That's great. I got to ask. So I have a couple of stories that were in my mind, and stories can be grandeur, and they take millions of dollars and a budget to do.
Mm-hmm.
You can write a book for a lot cheaper than you can make a movie for with a grand story.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
Well, especially because the book becomes sort of the proof of concept, right? Because you put a book out.
Right.
This was a script before it was a book.
really, okay.
Yeah, we started out life.
Yeah.
This
Wow.
this one that I'm working on now, the Impossible Dilemma. Impossible Dilemma was a screenplay before it was a book.
Yeah, hold that up for the camera.
Hello,
There you go.
camera. There it is.
Yeah.
See, yay!
Also, so who did
First
the artwork?
time nationwide. I did.
Really?
I did on both of them. I did the
Okay.
artwork myself.
Yeah.
That's great.
So
That's what's so
actually-
cool about it is you can do all this stuff
Yeah.
yourself.
Took
Save
this
money.
picture in a judge's office on his desk of his gavel, and my friend Michelle Guillory. Hey, Michelle. She helped me do this, and then I added in the pistol, and then the work. And
That's incredible. I
when
love
you
it.
work with the fine folks at Amazon, they tell you what size it has to be, how big the spine has to be, puts the ISBN number, all that stuff on it,
Mm-hmm.
and you turn it in. They give you sample formats. They help you do everything you need to do.
That is awesome. I love it. That is
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah.
So
Very
let's
cool.
give some tips and pointers out there to people. It's like would-be story writers. So
Mm-hmm.
say that I want to write a book and I have this concept of a story in my mind. How do I write it in the first person, third person? Does it depend on how the story goes? You know, I mean, how do you go about actually writing a book? Is that a daunting task? It seems like.
It is.
It is. First person is a very hard way to write. Unless you're very skilled at writing, I would recommend don't do first person. Third person, omniscient, where you're kind of like God, seeing what everybody's doing and you know what they're all thinking, is
Right.
the most common way, and it's the easiest way, and it worked for me.
She's smart.
Yeah,
Oh, I know. I can tell.
but I'm hanging around with you. So
That means you got bad judgment. That doesn't mean you're not smart. You just got bad judgment.
so anyway, yeah, that's really the easiest way to go. And I started this novel. I started it in first person, and
In first grade. It took a while.
Well, I can tell as
I'm,
thick as
I'm,
it is.
I'm
yeah.
13. Not. I don't even remember 13. But anyway, no, about my fourth chapter, I was like, man, this is not working for me. So
Right.
I went back and I changed it. And now the hard part about that is even in edits later, later edits, I was still finding the word I. I'm not supposed, it's not me anymore, it's them. So, and I really couldn't make up my mind who I was in that, and it just didn't work. But there was a lot of education in it, and even though I've done a lot of writing before, the author who finished this book was a lot more skilled than the author who started this book.
Yes.
But the number one thing about writing a book, start it. You
get
can
out there and do
keep
it.
talking about it, you can keep thinking about it, just sit down and start writing,
Right.
And these days, preferably, if you can, on a computer. Because digital files get sent all over. Everything's done digitally. I don't have to mail a manuscript off to anyone. You email it.
Right.
Upload it. You upload it to the
Yes.
to the sites.
If you're a person that's on the go and you don't have a lot of time to sit at a computer, can you do things on your phone, right on your slow time,
Absolutely. Eventually, you're going to have to convert it. Eventually, you're going to have to convert it downstream. What I did on this, because it was a screenplay, we imported from the screenplay format in Final Draft into a PDF, then into Word, and then corrected everything in Word, because the screenplay is told in the present. Chuck walks over and looks through the blinds.
Right.
In the book, it's Chuck walked over
Yeah.
and looked through the blinds.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's told in a different tense.
Yeah.
So, but now, as I'm finishing my second novel, third book, I'm actually writing it in the proper format to start
To
with.
begin with, right.
So I don't have to convert it, don't have to do any of
Yeah,
those
save a
things.
lot of
Not
time.
converting it is a big deal, because adapting
Yes.
a screenplay into a book is a serious effort.
Yes, which she did for one of my projects.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
To
that's
be
not
named
out
later.
yet. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not out
it's
yet.
a children's
but,
book,
But
but I could hear her swearing
oh,
all the way at my
no,
house
no.
when she was trying to convert my script.
A screenplay, it starts off and he's got this beautiful picture painted for you in words, and you can picture the whole scene.
Yeah,
and
descriptive,
and
right.
yes, exactly. But in a book, you don't want to start off a book with, a pretty day and the trees were glistening with the dew and everything. You need to start a book with action. You got to grab that reader and pull them into the book, and then they can find out where they are.
She's got a violent streak.
Right.
Me?
Grab that reader, pull them into the
I
book,
was,
shake them if they don't pay attention.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
I'm
Okay.
gonna start trying that on you.
So going up to the present day, personal justice. What is this book all about? If we can talk about it a little bit.
Sure. Personal justice actually was born of similar events in working to get custody of my oldest son, who is not my blood, but certainly my heart. And the book is dedicated to two guys in my life: my father, who had just passed away, and my son, who was the impetus for writing the book. And it's about a miscarriage of justice that was perpetrated on a man, because the justice system is, especially in Louisiana, is tilted toward the lady side of things. Sometimes
Yes, it
for the
is.
better, and sometimes for the better,
Yeah, you're right.
and sometimes not. And in this case, it was not. And so what happens is I built a fictitious person because I really didn't like the way the lady who represented his biological mother handled us. And so instead of causing her bodily harm, I wrote about someone who could get caused bodily harm and I wouldn't get arrested.
Right.
But and so there was a big miscarriage of justice with the way this fellow's children, wife and child were taken from him in a courtroom situation. And the child ends up dying 30 days after the trial, or after the divorce decree, because the mother was a blackout drunk, and he was not allowed to bring that up at trial because of the way the attorney dealt with him. And so his child was taken from him at 5, and his ex-wife had survivor's guilt and killed herself 2 weeks after that. So he lost his wife and his child very soon after because of the misdeeds, the illegal deeds of this attorney. And so he kidnaps her and brings her into a dilapidated courtroom, duct tapes her to the witness chair, and he becomes prosecutor, judge, and executioner?
Wow.
Question mark?
Well, I see blood all over the table right here.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And a gun.
When how that happened, that's Pond 5, y'all. I didn't make anybody bleed. But the thing is, and I tell people all the time, and Lisa's heard this, unfortunately, way too much, there's a double plot twist at the end. And so my guarantee is, if you can tell me what's going to happen before you read it, I'll give you your money back.
Wow, I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think so either.
Maybe they could figure out one of them, but not two of them.
Definitely not two of them.
No.
That is going to be an interesting read. I'm going to read this tonight on my off
Hey,
time.
you probably read it over lunch.
I was going to ask you, how long does it take to read this book about if you can do
Most
it?
people read it in 2 to 3 hours.
2 or 3 hours, yeah. I cannot wait to get involved in this, but it's going to be great.
As opposed to 2 to 3 weeks.
That's
Right.
not true. People tell me it's a fast read.
That's what they tell
They
you.
do.
Well, when it's engaging and you can't put it
Yes,
down.
yeah. They tell
Yeah.
me, and the first time someone told me that, I was like, wait a minute. You're kidding me, right? And she says, no. She says, because I couldn't put it down. I just kept turning the pages.
And the reviews prove it. I mean, you got 5 stars all
Oh
around.
my gosh! Oh my gosh! The reviews on Amazon, right? Last I looked, which was about a week ago, was 52 reviews, and 51 of them were 5 stars.
Wow,
And
that's
you
amazing.
can't, that's just it gives me goosebumps.
Right. Those
It's
are
amazing.
verified Amazon customers, like
Oh,
they always
yeah.
say. you know?
Right, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
verified by. Well, and the truth is, Lisa's an incredible writer. I mean, she really
Thank
is.
you.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
That's amazing.
all due respect, I mean, we kid each other a
We
lot,
do
but I have a
kid each
lot
other
of
a lot.
I have a lot of respect for that girl. She does
That's
a
why,
good job.
both of us, it's mutual respect.
Right.
Now we will deny we were saying this on the ride home.
That's it. That's
That's
it.
it. Get
By
down
the way,
there.
I hate you. I hate
No,
you.
I've never told you I hate you.
Yeah, she's thought it. She just never said it.
This gets kind of to the point where I was discussing in the prior podcast is like, never being afraid to tell your story. I think a lot
Right.
of people, and I've done it myself, I've had stories that I wanted to tell, but I was afraid that people might get offended by the stories because they are real. I always say, they say that, well, that's a rated R movie. You can't go see that movie. It's rated R. Life is rated R.
So was
Yes.
the Passion of the Christ.
Yes, that's right.
See that one?
That's right.
Ruh-roh.
I did, yes. That's
So
right.
yeah, and
Right.
look, and Lisa and I were sitting on the couch over there talking about it while you guys were talking about it in your podcast, and it's like, yeah, don't be afraid to tell your story, unless you're Jeffrey Dahmer.
Yeah, that's
Then
what
be
he
a little
said.
afraid. Be a little afraid.
Right.
It's like, well, I
But-
just got this taste for meat.
Right.
Yeah, okay, we're not going to go there.
Right.
But
Yeah.
but you're right. It's filmmaking to me is before writing was more of a storyteller's vehicle, because entertainment of any kind is the most powerful means of cultural expression.
Yes.
So if you're not telling your story, then someone else is telling it for you,
Good point there.
right? So
Yes.
don't be afraid to get your story out there, because it may be being pigeonholed in some other way by someone telling the story that it's not their story.
Right, right.
Right.
This is actually
Awesome.
truly my story. And, I watched Katrina, and I watched all those buses go underwater while people were just stranded in such a horrible situation, people
Right.
dying.
Right.
And so many people thought, I'm going to wait for the government to come help me. And that's kind of totally against the core of who I am. I think we're all responsible for our own, well-being
Right.
and that of our loved ones.
Absolutely.
And in that, I've always been a little bit of a prepper. Always, even when I had no money back in the day.
Right.
I always had like 6 extra cans of this and 6 extra cans of that, and it was just one little pantry, but it was well stocked. And I found that I have more prepper in me with this book. The tagline I use for the book is a well-researched fictional account of what it would be like to survive an EMP in rural Louisiana. It is,
So you make it personal to us South Louisiana people. Or
I actually set it in North Louisiana simply because I did not want people from my hometown in St. James Parish thinking that I was writing about St. James Parish. So I set it in North Louisiana in a fictional town, but it's rural Louisiana, and I might live in the city, but I'm a farm girl
Right.
through and through. And with the book, it's really it's an educational book, heavily disguised as a fun, entertaining novel to read. You know, it is fiction. You know, I use space weather to take out all our modern conveniences and everything. I didn't want to use politics or anything, and I didn't want to use anything that would be outdated. You know, if I had written a book about the Cold War in 1980, what would that mean now? You know, most of the people alive don't know anything about it.
Right.
So I didn't want anything that would date it. And, you know, so I take out all their modern conveniences, and it's a family that's trying to survive. But they had a prepper in the group, and he used to be the crazy old man who, you know, put all kind of food back, and, you know, everybody, he was kind of like the laughing stock of the community. And now suddenly they don't have food, they don't have cars, they
Who's
don't
laughing
have.
now?
Exactly. And now, so where's the food? They know who's got the food. So that presents, you know, other complications in their life.
Right. So the book revolves around a family or two people?
It revolves around a family. Now, it's got a romantic vein.
I was going to ask you about love interest, romantic stuff.
Yes, it's carried by a romantic vein, which helps it go through, you know, because you don't want to just see people working to survive constantly. So I think the romantic vein works. It's got a couple different ones. Chuck is sitting here cracking up.
Well, just because, you know, it has to be true love in this romantic vein because, you know, they're not taking regular showers. You know, the hygiene is probably not the best.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's got to be, you know, it's true love when you be smelling that stuff.
Well, one of the guys really likes the way she smells, and the other guy teases her about needing a shower. You want to guess which one she goes with?
Right.
A blind man could see that one.
There's a nurse on YouTube. She's a prepper nurse, and she talks about feminine hygiene in these situations.
Yeah,
So
I mean, because it's realities. What do you do, you know? And then this all made a prepper out of me, and now I have my go bag packed in the car.
Yes.
Wouldn't you like to be a prepper too?
I am.
No, the Dr. Pepper.
It's something.
All
Dr.
right,
Pepper.
exactly.
Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too?
Oh no! Look, burnt your hair off.
Oh man. Oh man.
See, now if they weren't alive in the 1980s, they didn't get my joke just now.
Right.
It's
That was
sick.
Pepsi.
Yeah.
That was Pepsi.
It was Pepsi.
And I don't have a glove on.
Right.
But yeah, so you know, I have the go bag in my car, and I have some stuff that I couldn't carry if I needed to, you know, start walking. If something happened and my vehicle didn't work anymore,
Yes.
there's a lot that I couldn't carry with me. But if I'm at my house or his house, God forbid, and have to
Or my backyard.
or, that's where Cindy would tell you is where he buries the bodies.
That's where the bodies are buried. Shh, be very quiet.
But yeah, the backyard would be worse. You know, I have stuff that we can bug in with, and you know, where you're not hitting the road. You're just going to try and survive, you know, until things get better.
Yes.
But during the middle of writing that, I had an epiphany. And now I'm wanting to sit in my jammies, and I don't want to do anything. You know, I'm hired a maid to come in and do the housework. My husband is doing the cooking. He's doing the shopping. I'm just writing. And all of a sudden, I put the computer aside, and I looked at John, and I said, I've got to go to the store. And he says, for what? Because it's completely out of the norm for the time. And I said, dried beans and rice and salt. And he says, okay.
Right.
John is her husband, by the way.
Yes.
Right.
She
yes.
didn't misspeak. She didn't
Yes.
say
Right.
John is her husband.
Yes, John is my sweetie honey.
Right.
Yep.
Hi, John.
Yep.
Yep. So what gave you the inspiration to write this book?
Well, first of all, I was sitting on a recliner for months. I had the time, and I've always wanted to do it. And then thinking back to the things of Katrina, this helps wake people up.
Yes.
And it just kind of brings home that, you know, prepare a little bit. You don't have to become a full-blown prepper, but at the same time, you know, if you have a little extra food, that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
You know, if you
Yes,
have
it
some
is.
extra bandages, you know, I have a whole bunch of stuff now. I'm kind of going crazy with it, but
Surprise, surprise, surprise.
I know. I made butter with an old-fashioned butter churn. John got me this beautiful Daisy hand butter churn for our anniversary the other day.
How romantic.
It is. It is.
by the candlelight, by the
'cause,
campfire.
yeah, it's one of the things I wanted. So he knew that it was something I wanted, but wasn't going out and buying myself.
What about canning? Have you did
Yes.
some canning?
Yep, I know how to can.
My grandmother used to do that. All our grandmothers used to do that.
Yeah, yeah. And then
Mason jars.
Yep,
yeah,
that's
so I
right.
have
Yep.
extra mason jars, and then all of a sudden it hits me. We have these little lids that you only use once, so now I have boxes of lids. Extra
Right.
lids.
And you can can all kind of stuff. Well, my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother was figs. Everything was figs everywhere.
Yeah,
Love
yeah.
'em, love 'em.
We made
Yep.
we canned the figs too. Yeah, and tomato products. And John and I will get on a fit of cooking, and we have this big giant pot that takes 2 burners on the stove. And we'll just cook a big batch of something, and then we'll eat a little bit, and we'll can the rest. And then
Yeah, that's
later
great.
on, when I'm writing and he doesn't feel like cooking, guess what we eat?
Right.
So it kind of helps him
Yeah,
out
Smart
too.
guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We have storable food hidden all over our living room right now. Actually, when I say hidden, I mean because you can make a table out of it. You can do all kinds
Yeah,
of stuff.
yeah.
Stick it in the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have an article on my website about, if you're just renting a room in somebody's house, you still can put some stuff away. And it walks you through, some
Wow.
of the more important things. And
Right.
and you can, hide a few pounds of beans with your socks. Chuck.
Yeah.
Yes, Chuck.
That's true.
Have you seen my socks?
Okay, you
I
can.
got a field worth
You
of
can
beans.
hide a sack of beans.
Sack of
with,
beans.
with Chuck's socks.
But you know what? I didn't realize that my children are preppers.
Oh, really?
Really?
Yes, man. I find leftover food stuffed everywhere in the room.
Right.
Leftover, under the cushions of my couch.
Charlie KK Brennan, I just smacked him for you.
That's it. She did. She did. I'm gonna have a bruise
And
come up.
other aspects of prepping too, you could call it prepping if you want, is take a self-defense class.
Oh yeah.
Practice firearm safety.
You have to protect the old man in this, who now he's the target because people want
Yes.
his supplies. So what's the first thing you have to do? So you have to protect what you have. And there's a lot of people who say, "Oh well, I have everything, but I don't want guns." And somebody who doesn't bother,
You won't have everything for long.
That's right.
you won't have everything for long.
That's
Yep.
exactly right. Yep.
You better at least pretend you have guns.
Yes, that's right.
You know?
And a 100-pound Doberman.
Yeah. In
That
Chuck.
helps.
Yes, and
With a
Chuck.
big stick.
What a. Let it go. Let it go.
Yes, and also being a paramedic too. First aid skills is essential
Oh
too.
yeah.
So,
I have the book, and you won't be able to go to the internet and Google this and Google that and look up instructions on how to do everything.
Sure.
So I printed up things, how to make cheese out of extra milk. But I
Yeah.
have the manual for when they teach basic EMT skills.
Great.
I
That's
have
good.
that. Then I have all that
That's awesome.
in giant Ziploc bags so that, they don't get wet.
Yeah, that's
You
great.
know, think about that too.
I remember
Global
back
warming.
in the 2016 flood, it might have been where the something happened on the interstate where all the drivers were stranded, and just so happened, thank the Lord, this big produce truck tipped over, and they had all these fruits and vegetables and stuff. Those people were not expecting to be on the road for 72 hours with no food.
Right.
Some of them did have food in their trunk. Can't let anybody know about it, of course. But
Right.
But so yeah, who would have
Right,
thought?
right. If it happens to us going home, I got enough food for me, and I can probably feed him for a day. No?
A
And if,
day.
if I act up, I'm going to be food for the next few days.
Right, a day.
I'll just trip him and
Right.
no.
Wow.
Right. What is the rule?
Ow.
How does it go? How does the rule go about
First in, first out.
not
A stitch
that
in time saves 9.
not that one? It's
Okay.
it's a survival rule about how long you can go without food, shelter, and water.
Oh yeah.
I think is it
Is it
is it a 3, 3, and 3?
3, 3, and 3, or yeah?
Or like
it's-
3 hours
yeah,
without like
3
an extreme
hours, yeah.
extreme elements.
Yeah, without heat, being able to keep your body heat, and then it's
3 days.
3
for water.
days
Water.
yeah, without water,
And
it's
3
like
days
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
or 3 weeks without
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 food.
food.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Some of
And-
us longer than that.
Some
I,
of-
Yeah.
I brought reserve. She brought food. I brought reserve.
Yeah, but yeah, it's a lot of interesting things though. But the book just it opens everybody's eyes. But the thing is, they quickly forget that they're learning something from this book.
Right. Why is this book so thick? What do you?
So
Lisa never met a word she didn't like.
Could it be used like
They're
a
all in there. All of them in there.
Chuck, Charles, no, no. So anyway, I wrote. I intended this originally to be two books,
Oh, really?
and I wrote about 2/3 of it, and got to where I thought the first one. I have a good break point there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I let my husband read it, and he's an avid reader, and he's very bright, and he's very good with the language. And he reads it, and every now and then man, this is good, So he gets,
Like, give me more, right?
yeah. So he gets to the end, and he says, "It's a great story, but where's the rest of it?" And I went, "I know."
Right.
So
is this the 2 books in one?
So
right
I'm
here?
blaming it on John. Yes, but
One mega book.
yes, but I'm writing a sequel to it now. If you go on the Amazon reviews, most people are asking for sequels, or I'm waiting for it, or I hope she writes one and stuff
Right.
like that.
So could this book be considered like a manual to help prepare, or is it just a story that people who are prepared when something bad happens?
It's a story about people who are prepared. They're the fortunate ones. It's Super Flair, the fortunate ones. But there's a lot you will learn about being prepared.
Good. That's great.
Yes,
A lot of instruction to it.
yes, there is. And it's not boring stuff where, you're giving details and people are jumping over it. But, because I don't want anybody to just start jumping paragraphs or skip a page, that would just tear me up. But,
Right. Oh, yeah. Right.
But it's enough to make you say, I might, that one thing I might be able to do, and they'll go and they'll look it up and learn more about it.
Right.
And she's doing great. I'm
That is
tickled
great.
with it.
I had a couple of questions I could ask on air, because I'm not going to mention anything specific about what I want to do or about what other things. But I had a question about writing a story. If you're interested in writing a story about another person, I'm talking about copyright laws. I'm kind of thinking things how they work and everything. So if I observe an interesting person in my life and I want to write a story about that person, do I have to get permission? Is it a copyright violation to tell events that happened in somebody else's life? Does it make a difference if they're a celebrity or if they were not well known?
Yeah, all those things are valid. That's you asked a whole lot of questions in that one statement.
Right.
Right.
If and first of all, let me say I'm not an attorney.
Right. Sure. Absolutely.
I don't even
right.
play one on TV.
Sure.
Disclaimer.
Right, yeah,
disclaimer.
disclaimer, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
But typically, if you're writing a story about a famous person, about events you heard, then you're in good shape because they're a public figure and it's out
Right.
there in public.
Right.
If you're trying to write a verbatim life story about that person and you do research and you find other things, then somewhere
Right.
down the line you probably should look to get some sort of life rights.
Right.
Okay, and then
And what if that person is dead?
then those rights will be passed on to their family
Okay.
unless they've been dead longer than 75 years or so.
Right. Okay.
Right, and then it
Interesting.
becomes public domain.
Interesting.
Yeah, lawyers, don't shout me down out there.
Right.
And then when it comes to an interesting person, it's nice to let that person in on what's happening. But for me, I would change the name to keep from
Right.
getting sued.
Right. Sure.
And
Yeah.
Right.
not about innocence,
right.
but it's about
Right.
it's an interesting story
Or it could be based on events or based on somebody.
based on things you've heard.
Right.
I wrote a story that was being turned into a screenplay called "Dying to Live," and that was based on a news article, a television news story actually that I saw about a guy who was a physician who went into the streets to deal with homeless people where they lived in their cars or in cardboard boxes and do medicine
Wow.
for them. So
Yeah.
don't steal my idea. And so it just
Right.
they come from different places, but first thing you have to ask yourself, do I have to tell the story about that person, or can I tell a story about a similar person
Right.
Right.
and still
Right.
get the message across?
Interesting.
And if you
Right.
have to tell that story about that specific person, then go to them
Yeah.
and talk to them. If they're not a famous person per se, typically they would be probably very flattered and would let you write about their life.
Right.
Because what you don't want to have happen if somebody's writing, and I've been fortunate to be mentioned in a few books myself, you don't want people to write your story without your consent, because if they get details wrong, then that's forever. That book
Right.
is out
Right.
there in the world forever. So I'd rather tell the story myself or help them tell the story myself and make sure the details are correct
Right.
than
Right.
have it told for me.
Right.
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 So
Right.
that's, if I was giving advice in a non-legal capacity,
Right,
that's
exactly.
that's what I would
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Yeah, it's good
Yeah.
guidelines to go by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's better safe than sorry, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah,
If there's always that question, go ahead and err on the side of
Caution.
Right.
caution.
You
8
know,
times out of 10, yes.
there's people that show up in my life. Some of them I don't even know their name, but there's going to be a little quirky something about them or a personality trait, and I'll incorporate that into characters because the more multifaceted your characters are, the more people can relate to them.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, they have to seem human. They can't seem perfect.
Right.
And some little quirky character, I'll just kind of grin to myself, and then I'll go send myself an email from one of my accounts to my business account, and when I go back to writing, I got all these little things. I'm like, oh yeah,
Right.
Forgot that one.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
you know.
Yep, that's very good. Very good rules to live by. We're going to wrap it up shortly because I think we're approaching the 1 hour mark already, which time flies by when you're having fun.
Yeah.
And while we're doing this podcast.
Yes.
Just kidding. Just don't get mad at me. Don't send emails. Be nice.
Fun for y'all. So if you could just break down real briefly the steps in getting a book published. So starting at the concept, somebody comes to you with an idea. I've been writing, I got my manuscript here. It probably needs to be proofread. I mean, this is my work, my rough draft. I want to get this into a book form. What are the basic steps to go in an hour or
Step
less?
1, write a check. Step 2, you laugh, but you know it's true.
It's true, yeah,
So-
because you got to pay somebody to work, and it's
Sure.
going to depend on how big that check. The check will depend on how much work you're looking to have done.
Sure.
If you're willing to do quite a few drafts and revisions, and you reread your own work, and Chuck is, I should never say this out loud in front of Chuck, but most people, they'll go and they'll do their first edit and they'll cut things out the book, and I realized that I didn't make things clear enough, and I add to it. And
Cut things out that aren't necessary.
right, and there's one scene is I have a battle scene, and basically when I read it back, although I kind of loved it was a big paragraph, it slowed the pace of it down. So that got
Right.
shortened. I mean, it's down to 2 or 3
Yeah,
sentences
doing films all the
instead of
time.
yeah. Exactly.
That
Yeah,
saves
it
money.
hits the cutting room floor.
Well, it's
exactly.
yeah.
but it's such a big difference because a screenplay by nature is structure, right? I mean, a screenplay has to be a lean, mean storytelling machine. And so a novel, I can take 10 pages to describe a sunrise. And I've seen a few sunrises that would demand that kind of space. But in a screenplay, you have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, 30 pages Act 1, 60 pages Act 2, 30 pages Act 3, and you don't deviate from that. So story structure in a novel is so much different than it is in a screenplay, because if you remove the structure from a screenplay, it's like you have the game of chess. You have pieces, you have a board, you have players, you have rules. Take away one piece of that, and it's not chess anymore. Take away the rules, for example, and you might have checkers. So a
Right.
screenplay is bound by certain rules, whereas a novel is not. So when you end up starting, like we said before, it is a daunting thing to stare at a blank page. So just start writing.
Yeah.
Even if it's
Right.
just get everything that's in your heart onto the page, and then
Right.
expound from there.
Right.
If I find that most avid readers want to be writers. Well, if you're a reader, guess what? You already got half the battle down because you
Yes.
know what you're looking for in a novel.
Yes.
Right.
So step back
Right.
and think, okay, if I'm reading this book, what will I have to add to make the story complete? And then by the time you have a completed manuscript, then you can bring it to us, and we'll talk through it. What are your goals? What do you want to do? Something you really need to do first is build your audience.
Yep.
In the day of
Right.
social media,
Social
start
media.
making your audience for you
Right.
through Facebook, through Instagram, through Twitter.
Yeah, we
And
both
then-
have thousands of Instagram followers and all, and that
Right.
helps,
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right.
Because now you have a platform to get out there for people to be interested.
Yes.
Right.
Right. And that's the name of the game, because that's what a big publishing house is going to do for you. They're going to throw their money at their marketing machine to get it out there for you. Whereas if you've built your marketing already, then and do it while you're writing. Don't wait till the book is done. Do it
Right.
at the same time. Throw snippets out. Throw a sentence or two out that are interesting for you,
Right.
that you think will be interesting to other people.
It's
and then
daunting.
It is.
It is
But-
daunting.
But you know what? Do it.
Yeah, right.
Courage is not working in the absence of fear. courage is working in spite of fear.
Yes.
And so failure. One of my favorite things to say is failure is a terrific teacher, but a terrible master. So if you let fear of failure get to you, you're not going to write anything. But just get it down, especially on a word processor, because then if you don't like it, guess what? Backspace.
Right.
Yeah.
Group, select, delete.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Yeah.
But once you've got it in a form that you like, then let's take a look at it. Bring it to us. We'll take a look and we'll say, okay, we think it's ready, or we feel like you're kind of missing some story pieces here, because story structure. I'm a big fan of story structure. I work very hard to structure story.
Right.
Then, if it's ready to be printed, then we have to hire an editor. So either you hire the editor, we hire the editor. It depends on the deal we strike.
Right.
But you've got to have an editor, because you know what
Yes.
you're trying to say. An editor has no idea. So when you miss a word, this, that, do, when, we, any of those words are missing, they're going to catch it where you will see it in there. Your mind is already predisposed to seeing it because you know what you're trying to say.
Yep.
Hire that editor.
Absolutely.
Hire that editor.
Wow, yeah.
You have to have a editor.
Right.
So
Anyone who thinks they can edit it themselves is going to put out a book with more. They're going to be disappointed in the end
Right.
because
Right.
it's going to have so many errors.
yes.
And it's from spelling errors to just, grammar errors to story errors.
Sure.
Wow.
But the more they work on their book themselves and we can guide them through it, the less it costs them.
Right.
Right.
But
Yeah. It's proportional. The amount of work you
Yes.
do reduces the amount of involvement we need, and therefore the amount of
yes.
dollars that it will require, or percentages, or because we work on different scales, different things.
Yeah.
Everything from cookbooks to novels, self-help.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll do it all. We'll help with everything,
Right.
because
Yeah.
we believe in writing. We believe
Yeah.
in people being able to express themselves that way.
Right.
We're thrilled we did it. And
Yes.
200 years from now, our descendants are going to say, well, I had this great grandma who wrote this book. You ought to
Yes.
read it. They
It's a
will.
legacy.
It is an absolute legacy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to put it out, you want it to be good.
Yes,
Yes.
you do.
You don't
Yes,
want to
'cause
leave it ugly.
Good or bad
legacy.
is forever.
Forever.
Right.
Forever.
Exactly
Yeah.
right. It's your work, your body of work.
Mhm,
Yeah.
That's right.
mhm.
So
Be
if they
careful.
want to write, we can help.
Yep.
Yes.
You got a minute for me to tell
Go
you
for
about
it.
this?
Yes, go for it. Yes.
So,
Yes.
while I was writing
it up,
Super
Calhoun.
Flare, my granddaughter, that's another story. That's the bookmark part. So while I was writing Super Flare, my granddaughter, who was 7 at the time, says, Mama, I want to write a book with you, just me and you.
Yes, indeed.
So when Super Flare went to the editor, I asked her, I said, so baby, what do you want to write about? That child knew her story. So we created, she chose an elephant because it's her favorite animal. And she had just out of the blue had asked me what my favorite animal was.
She likes me.
Eh. And
Elephants. Work with
and
me.
that was Victoria. I like horses and cats, but anyway. So it ends up being 3 friends, and it's a story, and it encourages children to pick up their toys. That's a little spin Mama put on the story. But I have another great niece who lives in Florida. She's in high school, and she did the illustrations. I evidently have a lot of bookmarks in here.
Yeah.
And when Victoria was first telling me about the book, what she wanted to write, she told me that, and we're going to have bookmarks so the kids don't lose their place in it. And then when she was, for her last birthday, right before the book came out, my birthday gift to her was bookmarks for her book. And
Awesome.
she's just having the time of her life with it. But it's
Yes,
cute,
indeed.
and it's a good story, and people are liking it. And that one is available in hardcover and paperback.
That's great.
Yep.
That is awesome. I want to ask you also. So you get the manuscript done by the editor. It's approved. It's good to go. You accept it.
Mhm.
Now comes time to publish it in paperback and online. So how does that process work? Pretty much?
Well, by the time we like it and we're ready to do something with it, it goes to the editor. We're already working on cover art.
Oh, okay.
We're already thinking about those
Yep.
kind of things. And again, I did this myself in Photoshop. So if I can do it, guess what? Anybody else
Right.
can do it.
Right.
So if you're good at Photoshop or graphics, then you can do your own cover art and just deliver it.
Yep.
And there is a format that Amazon would expect to have it in, at the way they expect to receive it in a certain bit depth and all that kind of fun stuff. And,
Right.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
we can walk you through it.
Yep.
We can provide it for you. Amazon will even say, okay, if your book is this many pages, a pamphlet, then your spine has to be this size to be able to
Yeah.
contain it, because you don't do a front cover, you do a whole cover.
Yeah,
So
it's
you
a
do
front,
the
back.
the front,
Oh,
the
right.
spine,
Back and
and the
spine.
back,
Right. It's
and so
opened up,
it tells you what the dimensions need to
yeah.
be, and then you send it out. They give you a proof back, and you love it, you don't love it, or what have you, and you
Yep.
tweak
Right.
until you get it right.
Now,
Yep.
this is the fun part to talk about. So, how do royalties work?
Well, it depends on your distributor.
Yeah, there's
if you're
different
dealing with
ones.
if you're dealing with Amazon, then they take a split and provide it back to the publisher, who then in turn, whatever the agreement is with the writer,
Okay.
gives them their share
Right,
of
right, yeah.
of the
Right.
royalties.
And how often are royalties distributed?
Royalties, depending on how much you sell, hopefully it's enough that it's distributed on a monthly basis.
Monthly,
Okay.
yeah.
And the nice thing about us is we have reports. So when you want to know how many you've sold, we can instantaneously pull it up and tell you
Cool.
how many hard copies you sold, how many
Ebooks.
ebooks you sold, how many pages were read in Kindle
That's
Unlimited,
incredible. Wow.
and
Yeah.
all that on
Yeah.
a daily basis. So you can know at any given point where
Yep.
you stand,
Yep.
and it's
And-
right there in black and white for everybody to see. It's an
Right.
honest, transparent system.
Right. Then there's also, if you want to be on the shelves of Barnes and Noble, there's
Yes.
also, we can walk you
Right.
through that too, and that's
Mhm.
a totally separate from Amazon.
Right.
Yeah, I mean we've learned all this the hard way.
Absolutely.
Right.
Self-taught
Oh, yeah.
self-publishing.
Mhm,
Right.
Yeah,
But,
got the
um,
black eyes to prove
But
it.
we, yeah, three of us who made it through, and then Chuck says, "Hey, let's all talk about this." And because writing is really truly the easy part.
Yes.
I had a
Yeah.
friend who helped me publish this one, and he told me writing's the easy part, editing is not writing's the fun part, editing is not the fun part, but marketing, that's where your work's at.
Right.
Sure.
And we are serious about marketing our books, because you don't put that kind of time into a project just to let it sit
Exactly.
someplace.
Yeah.
Let it, yeah.
And on
Right.
June 8th at New Iberia, Maddie's Books and Treasures, we are going to be
Yep.
holding a self-publishing panel
Yep.
at a bookstore and then signing our books afterward.
Oh,
Yep,
great.
yep. That's
So-
what, 2 in the afternoon?
That's 2 in the afternoon
In
on
New
June 8th in
Iberia.
New Iberia.
Yeah, make sure everybody goes
So
out
you
for
better show up. I'll
Yep.
be checking names at the door.
Well, that is great. All
Yeah.
right, well, it sounds good. Timmy's telling me we were bumping up against just past an hour. So it was great having y'all on for the show today.
Oh, thank you,
any
David,
parting
for having
words you
us.
want to say before we go out?
Yeah, it was good seeing you again, David.
Absolutely.
It's been a
Oh,
while
yeah.
since I've seen you.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Thank y'all for coming. out to
proud of a
New
New Roads boy out there, man. Podcast
Yeah.
worldwide. Tim, thanks
know.
thanks for handling the background
yes,
stuff,
yes.
buddy.
He's like the Wizard of Oz
Yeah,
back
he's
there.
Kicking names and taking butt.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah, he's in the back doing his thing.
Yep.
That's
Absolutely.
great. Okay, well, sounds great. So once again, great for having y'all on the show. We're definitely gonna have you back. Well, you're gonna be back tomorrow, right?
I'll be back tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow. And who are you bringing back with you tomorrow?
Jeffrey Horner
Yeah, that's
to talk
gonna
about
be-
our new project, which is Business Spotlight Louisiana.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
it's great.
Focusing on
Jeff Horner
businesses.
and I go back a long ways too. Back in the old, the '90s and the SVHS days.
Yeah, big
Wow,
time.
huh?
Yep.
Big time. So he's a good guy, and
Yes.
we're offering a service. His company's offering a service that's really going to be good for
Yeah.
some businesses in Louisiana.
Well, that's gonna be
Yes.
great. That's gonna be great. Okay, well, Lisa, we're definitely gonna have you come back on later
Thank you.
on. So we'll update you with some more projects that you got coming up and everything.
Sounds good. I got a bunch of children's books and a sequel to Superflare in the works right now.
All right. Well, that sounds
Thank you.
great. All right, we're gonna shut our show down, but before we do that, we're gonna put another plug in for PoinkaPreporter.com.
I love those guys.
Yes, they are good. And don't forget to check out Poinka P's online news and information hub, PoinkaPreporter.com, which features links to area media articles about Poinka P. Dial them up on the web at PoinkaPreporter.com. So with that being said, we're going to see you guys later on, and have a great day.